because I speak on all things metaphysics, manifesting, spiritual gifts, awakening. And so today I decided to share my own awakening story. Those of you that follow me know that typically I love to share stories that will help you to shift and change. And I like to pull them from my own life or lives of some of my clients because I want people to know that this is real stuff. This is not just all airy fairy and woo woo and all this stuff. So, in my awakening story, and the music, y'all, is royalty free, relaxing flute music. This is what I decided to play today. Um, this way, we get rid of all the copyright, all that stuff. So, anyway, so my awakening story, I actually am the product of Pentecostal holiness. And so my grandmother was a Pentecostal holiness preacher, and her birthday would have been yesterday. So happy heavenly birthday, Grandma. She would have been 102. However, I was raised in that, and to be honest, I was spoon fed the Bible. So we learned that stuff like out of the womb. I think honestly, I think probably in the womb we had learned some things. So um, I wanted to share that as I grew, I realized that I had these gifts. Of course, at the time, I didn't know they were gifts. I really didn't know what it was. I just knew that I saw things, I heard things. Spirit spoke to me all the time. I've listened to spirit since I was a child. I actually am a prayer warrior, and I have been since I was 3 years old. My grandmother actually used to have these little prayer services. And I say little because it just usually was small churches, but it was such a huge impact till I can't really call it little because we would go in these places and she would lay hands on people and pray, and then she would call me up to lay hands on people and pray. And I would, and I did. And people got healings. Even today, because today I pray when I do lives on TikTok. I pray on my lives. Thank you so much for hanging out. But I wanted to just share a little bit about my story and my background just so that those people that are new to me and those people that maybe haven't heard my story or haven't seen it anywhere can understand. And so I had these gifts as a child, and my grandmother actually was amazing. She was a pastor. She had gotten away from the Pentecostal holiness church and actually started her own church, and it was called Clothing of Power Church of Restoration, because she believed in healing, and she believed that we could heal our bodies, and she believed that God was a healer. And so that growing up with that, y'all, made me know and made me understand. And even though I have my own challenges with my body in different areas, and I may share some of that later because I'm not gonna be on there that long, here that long. I'm actually going through long COVID, and I've been dealing with that now for about 2 years. And it's been challenging. However, I used a lot of the tools that she taught and a lot of the tools that I learned as I've been on this journey. And so, as I grew through all of that, raised up like that, Pentecostal holiness, and not in a deep way like some of the people that I know and some of the people that I knew were raised. Um, okay, so um, I kind of started just having questions because the mediumship thing, y'all, that started when I was a little girl as well. And for me, it was so crazy the way it started. For me, it started where I would see people, like if we went places, because my grandmother was, by her being a pastor, she was always a person that went to all the funerals in the family and friends and everybody. We were always at funerals. And I was her road dog, so I went with her. And so I would go to see these people, or she would go see people that had called her and asked her to come pray with them, stuff like that, because she was really a woman of the people. And I know that a part of the legacy that I have and a part of what she imparted into me was for me to do this same thing. However, we're in 2024 and we're doing it differently, so I'm here online sharing this good news and these amazing messages. Um, whereas she went place to place, and we went a lot of places. And I remember that sometimes we would see people, and like wherever, like we would go to their house or something, and she'd be talking to people, and all of a sudden I would look at them, and all of a sudden I would get this flash in front of my eyes, and I would see them in the casket, like in the box. It's the weirdest thing, y'all, and I've not ever heard of anybody else experiencing in that way. So that was another thing that, I struggled with, because there's nobody that could tell me about that. I have not seen anybody that expressed that that was a gift that they had in that way. I used to say I see dead people, but I would see them alive, and then I would see them in the box. And the weird thing for me was that when I saw them in the box, they would have on exactly the same clothes that I saw them in the vision that I saw them in the box. Does that make sense? So, like, I would see them, say, okay, so one of my aunts, I saw her, she had a white suit on in the box when I saw the vision. When I went to her funeral, she was buried in a white suit, and it looked exactly like the suit that I saw in the vision of her in the box. Okay, so that was a struggle for me, and it was a challenge, because as a child, what do you do with that? Drop down in the comments and let me know if any of this resonates with any of you. What do you do with that? What do you do? I mean, for me, I told my grandmother, and she was the only person that I have told until now, until in the last, few 20 years. I told her that, this is what I was seeing, and I would ask her, what was I supposed to do about it? And she said that I was supposed to pray for the person and ask God if I was supposed to tell them. And so this was what I did. And I did this for a few years until, hello, Lopez Katie, thank you for joining. I did it for a few years until I figured, until I asked God to take that away, because it was so scary. Because it was not only people that we knew were dying, it would be people that I would see and we wouldn't know they were dying, like they weren't sick at all in any way, that, like not sick unto death or anything like that. And so that was scary to me, because it's different if, they're on hospice, or they're dying, or they have cancer or some kind of, disease or condition that's going to kill them. That's a whole different thing. But this was a different thing, because this, I would see the people, in their element, and then all of a sudden I was seeing them in a box. And next thing I know, we was going to their funeral. So that was challenging for me, and and so I asked God to take that away. And so he did. And fast forward, some years went by, and I kind of started having some of those same types of experiences. Like I started really, having the same thing. I was at church, and I saw this young lady, and all of a sudden I seen her in the box, and yeah, and that was a struggle for me. And I actually spoke to my pastor about that. I was still going to church then. And I spoke to my pastor about, these things, these visions that I had, and, this gift of sight. And he actually kind of laughed about it and said, well, let me know if you ever see that for me. And, of course that, kind of irritated me, hurt my feelings a little bit, because, people making fun of these things that you're trying to understand. And so I didn't think about it no more. But then I had an experience again, and it was a little bit different. And so that's when I knew that, these gifts were opening up for me. However, I had been, doing a lot of praying. Was doing a lot of meditating. I was doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and I call it an underneath the ground work. And as I did that, a lot of the other gifts started not only coming online, but they started opening up, because I truly believe that we all have all of these gifts anyway. And now I'm looking at, like, I got this thing now, I'm looking at, y'all, it's 32 types of star seeds. And so I was looking into that, trying to see, what type of star seed I was. And so far, I've gotten through up to 6. And y'all know what? 6 was the one that I think is me. It says, Lyran star seeds have come to Earth in order to help others understand that they are spiritual beings, not just physical. Lyrans can feel very different from other people because of their beliefs. This might cause them to experience some discrimination when it comes to religion or spirituality. And so I got through that. Y'all, there's so many different ones. I'm going to cover them. And I think I'm going to do some videos on them just to share about what they are, because a lot of us know that we're star seeds, but we don't really know what kind of star seeds. Like I love water, so I thought I was one of the avatar people, the blue people or whatever. You know, but as I'm studying, I'm looking through some of this information, I realized that it's a little different. And so for me, I realized that that made me a little different, which I already knew that anyway, because when you are a child that can pray, you're a little different. You know, when you are a child that's a prayer warrior, and when you are a child that sees dead people, you know that you're different, you know? And so I always do that. So it was never, a question that I was. And you're right, Lopez Katie, the love. And so I started really, diving into this. And even though I was still going to church, and now, I don't say anything against the church, the church had its place for me, and but I can't do it anymore because I'm not doing religion because I believe that most of them are cults. Matter of fact, I believe all of them are. Because I believe that you can connect with God, with your source, with the universe, whatever you call him, her, or them, for yourself. You don't need anybody else to go through. You don't need a connector, because God is you. God is within each and every one of us. And so as I started to grow and believe and explore that, it really started making it really difficult for me to deal with all of the brainwashing and the manipulation that was going on in religion, because that really is what it is. When I started looking at the origin of how they created some of these texts, and how they're not right when you start looking at how it creates division, and God is love. God is always love. So God is not a divider. But yet these religions create division. You got the Catholics over here, and you got the Jehovah's Witnesses over here, and you got the Pentecostal over here, you got the Church of God in Christ over here, you got the Baptists and the Methodists and the Episcopalians and the what are those other people? I can't even think of them. There's a whole bunch of them. You got Islam, you got Judaism, you got Buddhism, you got all these things that just really serve to further divide us. And so when I started seeing that, I decided that it was time for me to exit stage left. And I actually went to ministry school with my church. I went to ministry school. I trying to think, Lord Jesus, I was working in the ministry. I was over a ministry. My ex-husband was also over a ministry. Our children worked in ministry. So we've been there, and I have nothing to say about that except good things, because there were good things that happened in there. I raised my children in the church with the knowledge of Christ and knowing how to pray. My children all know how to pray. They speak light language, which is speaking in tongues, all of that. So they know how to connect to their soul. They know how to connect to the spirit. They know how to get a prayer through. And that was something that I knew that they needed in this world, especially being children of color, black children, because make no mistake, we haven't had an easy time in this country nor in this world. So I decided that it was time for me to, begin to really open up to the spirit world in a way that I had not in the past. Now, I've always been open, and I've always had a connection to God. And I actually had a reading, y'all, that this lady told me that I had one of the most divine and the deepest connections with Jesus that she had ever seen. And so I knew that. Like, I've known that. I've known it, because Jesus actually is my healing guide. So he actually participates in helping me when I do healing work and stuff, because I know the connection that I have, but moving forward and going through, like, when I really decided to really seriously listen to direction from God. And so God told me to leave the place I was. And this was 2012 when I heard the direction. I left in 2013. This was the end of 2012, probably November 2012 when I heard this, because it was after my birthday, which is in November. And so I heard this message, and I heard this word from God saying, it's time for you, to leave this place. Excuse me, y'all. I'm speaking truth and I'm clearing and I can feel it coming out of my throat. And so God told me it was time for me to leave this place. Clear as I'm talking to you. So, people say that clairaudience, you can hear, it doesn't, it's not audible or something like that or whatever. And sometimes it is not, and sometimes it is. For me, it's always been audible. I've always heard spirit. Like once I started really looking into it and diving and seeing, I've always heard spirit. And so this was a little different because it was so loud that I looked around to see who was talking to me, because spirit was like, it's time for you to leave this place. And that was it. And I was like, leave this place? Physically, spiritually, emotionally, what? Because I was actually in the middle of all kinds of things at that time. I had a relationship that I needed to get the hell out of, and the man was almost stalking me and almost wouldn't let me go. And that's a whole nother probably lie, but but I knew I needed to leave. And then spiritually, I felt like I was broken, because I was divorced at the time, and I was dating this other guy, and I had told him that I didn't want him and I wasn't going to be with him, and he just really did not take no for an answer. He didn't want to take no for an answer. So I just started packing my shit to go, and I knew that it was time for me to go. And so when spirit told me that, I was like, wow, this is so right. And so I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that it was time. And I trusted enough and I had enough faith. And hear me when I say that, because I have had trust issues for a long time. But I had enough faith to trust that God had me and that everything was going to work out as it should. That everything was working out in divine timing. But let me tell you the hell that I went through in that process. Now, I probably will have to come on and do a part 2 for this, because it looks like we're going to have to go in a minute. But in that process, y'all, I really had to trust. And what happened is I had to trust because everything looked sideways and went wonky. And many times when we say that we hear from God, we expect, now this is our expectations, but we expect that everything's just going to work out and it's going to line up, and all of a sudden, and all of our money problems will go away, and all these other issues that we have are gone, and all these are things that we expect. But y'all, let me tell you, it does not often happen in that way. It does not. And for me, it definitely did not. And at that moment, it made me think. And so I had already had this thing in my mind that things work out for other people, but not for me. And I didn't realize even that I was carrying that. But I carried that because, I was a child of divorce. My parents divorced when I was young. My mom, well, actually, both of my parents remarried. So I'm the only child of them. And then they remarried and had other kids. So I laugh. I said, I'm the only person with my DNA because there's no other children that my parents had, the ones that birthed me. My father, my mother actually married, and I have my dad, who's lovely, and God loves me like he loves his own children that he made. So I'm just so grateful and fortunate with that. However, I was a child of divorce, and so that left some scars and some wounds. Even though I didn't realize it, I didn't know, I didn't even think about it. But when it started hitting and I realized, I was like, oh my God, it left some scars and some wounds. It did. It left a huge ass abandonment wound that I didn't realize I had until just recently. Like just recently, I realized I had this abandonment wound, and I started dealing with it like in the last year. And I've been dealing with it, and I understand it now, and I can see what it does. Because what happens is people talk about these wounds and stuff, the abandonment wound, and the there's all kinds of wounds, a witch wound and all kinds of different wounds. But what happens a lot of times, because I always feel like things are always taken from. And so that was something that set in motion and was with me, that I had to start releasing, and I had to start letting it go, because I'm here to help other people. I'm also here to open up the gate. People gatekeeping this information and all this beautifulness. And so I'm here to open that up, and I'm here to further my grandmother's legacy of healing and love and grace, and showing people how to connect to their soul and how to connect to their gifts and how to begin to really use these gifts in order to help them shift their life, in order to help them come into the place that they have envisioned themselves. The place that they visualize, that beautiful place. Because many of us know that we are star seeds and we were not born, we were not from here, and we feel it. And so I'm here to help you to normalize feeling good, normalize connecting to spirit, normalize listening, feeling, knowing, using your gifts. I'm here to normalize all of that. And so when I made that move and I did that thing, y'all, it's like all hell broke loose. When I tell you, I used to work 2, 3, 4 jobs, like for all my 20s and my 30s and most of my 40s. And I was at my 40s at that time. And when I tell you, God had been trying to pull me away and pull me into, another direction. And I have been fighting it, even though I didn't realize it. And consciously, I don't think I was fighting it, but subconsciously, I think I was. Because when I started realizing, and I started looking at some of the things, the themes in my life, started really seeing, who I was and where I was and what in the hell I'm supposed to do. When I started doing that and I got that direction from God, it's time for you to leave this place. And I did. I thought, okay, everything's going to be really smooth and all that. Well, it wasn't really smooth initially. Initially, it was hurtful and it was really stressful because I actually got fired from 2 jobs at the same time, like within a week of each other. Like I had 2 jobs and I got fired from one and then I got fired from the other one. And it was like a culture shock for me because I've worked many jobs, I've quit lots of jobs, but I had never but at that time been fired. Never been fired. So when I realized that, that was a call to action for me, to spirit, and I went within, and I actually met my first mentor, my second mentor. My first was my grandmother, but my second mentor that came to me, I met him, and he was able to help me and guide me in some of this, and guide me into, he gave me the Bach flower remedies, which really helped to shift a lot of things emotionally for me. And then he taught me how to use them and how to help other people with them. And so that's something that I know that it's time for me to pull back out of my toolbox and help people with. But that was a part of how I got there. It's like, oh my God, and he actually just happened to be in this place. So I know he was there. Part of the reasons he was there was for me because I needed help. And I didn't have any money because, of course, I didn't have no jobs. And I went across the country with $500 and an astronomical car note that I had to work out and pray over and talk to the people about not taking my car because I didn't have no money. So that was like a stressor for me. But I learned how, through that process, I learned how to manage that stress. And I learned, what to do in order to shift, in order to try to continue on. Because, those are times when people get real jaded and all kinds of crazy shit can happen, but I was not even playing those games. Wasn't playing them. So again, I'm going to have to continue this and do a part 2 and share some more. But I thank you for hanging out with me, Lopez Katie, and enough. Thank y'all. I appreciate you. But I'll be back on and I'll do a post 2. I mean, a part 2 so that you guys can hear the rest of it. Because apparently I thought it was only going to be about 10-15 minutes. But it's taking me a little bit longer to unpack this story for you guys. So anyway, watch out again for the part 2. Probably it'll be tomorrow because I got to go. Love y'all. Bye.